T minus 10 not acceptable.
Hello world, I'm Candice.
And I'm Darlene.
And welcome back to She Speaks Freely. This week's episode is all about self-care. And I'm so excited to be speaking about this topic.
Yeah, so we went ahead and asked a couple questions on our story, and we got a few responses. And one thing that we'd like to talk about first is what self-care is.
Okay, so my definition of self-care, it could be many things, but what I find to be the most important would be emotional self-care. Like a lot of times we get going and doing what we're doing, taking care of others, so focused on everybody else's, emotional state that we forget to take time and pay attention to what we're feeling and what we're thinking and how that actually influences our actions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely think self-care takes many forms. It can be from, like Candice said, your mental health and emotional health to your physical well-being. And for me, I personally, drawing or, taking 20 minutes to watch a dumb YouTube video that I like to watch, something like that. And then one other thing that we wanted to touch on before diving into the other questions is what self-care is not. So
yes, so there's this, to me, what I've seen in the world lately is that it could be like buying a new shoes or something. Like marketers kind of use that as a way to push items on people, and I do think that sometimes that action sometimes can be a form of self-care. But I don't think that's the only way to take care of yourself. And I really believe in managing your emotional state, because a lot of people don't think about what's going on in their head, and really understanding that. And if you have mental issues, therapy could be one way to kind of work that out. But there's also just taking an inventory on yourself and just saying, hey, this situation made me feel apprehensive, different things, and then making the adjustment. So that would be.
Yeah, so instead of something that might be temporary, it's something that's a little bit more permanent, because, if you buy too many shoes, it can cause a financial stress sometimes.
Yes.
And we definitely don't want that. But I would agree with that as well. I think it can be very different for everyone. And then, why is self-care important?
Wow. Self-care is important because that's the best way I believe you can communicate in the world and be the best version of yourself. So, if you don't take care of yourself first, then you're pouring from an empty cup, and you can't really be as effective with others, because humans are very intuitive and they pick up on those things very quickly. So it can help you in your career, it can help you in your parenting, it can help you in your love life. I really feel like self-care is essential to your world and your well-being.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I mean, there's so many good points, but I think for me personally, making sure that I have time to myself instead of just focusing on my relationship, focusing on my child, focusing on everything else, it helps me become happier. When I'm not focusing on myself, you can definitely tell a difference. I tend to get pretty grumpy just because I feel like everyone's asking me for things and I don't have any time to unwind or de-stress or figure out what it is that I want to do. And I'm a firm believer in, when you go on an airplane and they tell you to make sure you put your oxygen mask on first. It's pretty much the same thing in real life, because if you don't take care of yourself or put your oxygen mask on first, then you can't help anyone else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's you might be trying to help somebody and actually run out of air. So
yeah, exactly. So what do you do for self-care?
I like to meditate. I find that to be just about the number one thing that helps me, especially in times of high stress and times of fear, which have been a lot lately, with everything that's going on. So I meditate quite a bit. Like you said, finding that time to just unwind, to kind of be myself. So I take mental inventory. Another thing that I do, which is very important to me, is I manage my interpersonal relationships. That actually makes me happy. So I like to make sure that if there's a situation, like for example, there was a family party that I did not feel good about being there, and I learned that at that time, the anxiety that I was feeling, I should have left. But am I being loyal to other people who wanted me to be there? I stayed. And it didn't work out well for me. That night was horrible. So I'm learning to listen to my intuition and just say, hey, you know, this particular situation, I love this person. I want to do as much as I can for them. But it's important for me to pay attention to what my needs are and remove myself from the situation if that's the case. But the most important thing is paying attention to what I really need and making sure I provide that to myself. The same way that I pay attention and care to my daughter.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what party you're talking about. But anyways.
The jumping off the roof party.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was me. I jumped off the roof and we're fine. Anyways. Yeah, so I'm that type of person too. I always say yes. And I found that actually sometimes saying no or removing myself from a situation is actually better for me in the long run. That's something that I'm trying to learn how to do differently, is take care of myself by saying no to things that I don't want to do.
Say no.
I always say
yes. Yes, but it's draining, and then you don't get the things done that you want to accomplish.
Yes.
And then you're unhappy, and it's like a cycle, you know, domino effect.
Yeah. And I mean, I've heard people say, like, it's not all about you, and, you know, you have a child and you need to focus on your child. But a lot of people are out on the outside looking in, and they're not seeing that you can only be happy when you have time for yourself or do something for yourself that makes you happy. Everyone has to have something that they do. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where somebody has been like, well, isn't that kind of selfish? But
yeah, I get that all the time, and I do believe there's a balance, but I don't think prioritizing your needs is by any means selfish. As a matter of fact, I think it's best for if you're parenting, or it's best for your relationship. And I think a lot of times people forget that when you have a child, even though you're doing all the responsibilities for that child, everyone's an individual. So even she's gonna need her own time to do self-care.
Yes.
So if you can teach her that routine, because, you know, I believe in modeling the way for your children versus like telling them. If you do that, then she would pick up on that and learn to do it for herself.
Yeah, that's true. So I know before we had talked a little bit about your dating life.
Yes.
And how that relates or ties into self-love. So I was wondering if you could touch in on that a little bit more.
Yes. So I'm single, just throwing that out there. No, but on a serious note, I've been dating, and this is the first time that I've taken a different approach. So my approach this time is to truly be myself. So instead of saying the things that I think would attract someone, and instead of trying to like align myself as to what, you know, popular culture does or popular narrative, I like to highlight my differences. So in my communication with these guys, I make sure to, you know, like I like country music. That's a random fact. And I'm really good at line dancing, or I'd rather go hiking, or, you know, I mean, nobody's really partying right now because of COVID, but I don't really do that anymore. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that, you know, my life and the direction of what I want, and I'm way more upfront in what I want. So it kind of closes a lot of doors, but I'm excited about that, because instead of like leading a guy on and then, you know, I'm starting to catch feelings or whatever, then finding out later that, oh, he doesn't really want anything serious.
Yeah, and it doesn't tie into what you want.
Exactly. And I don't want to waste a whole lot of time. I want
Exactly.
to weed out the right people. So yeah.
And I think part of self-love is making sure that you know who you are and loving yourself, because you can't have somebody else love you if you don't even love yourself.
And, you know, after my divorce, that was the one thing that, like, I didn't know who I was. Like, you would think you know who you were. Like, I was, you know, living by myself. I was in Texas, and I just had to, like, rebuild everything emotionally and figure out, because at that time I was going to stay there forever. And so it was like big shocker, you know, I got the job in California, and so I went there, and I took that time, and I'm still taking that time to really find out who I am and what I really like. That goes back to the self-care and paying attention to the things that you really like versus like what people think you should like or prescribe on you.
Or even like, instead of molding yourself to fit somebody else's dating profile or what they would want, you're having your own personality and your own traits come out of who you are. That way it attracts the right person.
Exactly. That's actually very important to me. So
yeah, that's good. That makes sense.
Yeah, so we'll see how it works out. Keep you posted.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. So how about you? How has self-care shown itself in your relationship?
Oof. Well, as I said before, I'm pretty grumpy if I don't have any time to de-stress and, you know, unwind from the day, or even have like 20 minutes to myself. I have a lot going on, and it's very apparent when I'm not doing anything that serves me. It's just been happier ever since, you know, because once you have a baby, everything changes, obviously. Yes. Focusing on what each other needs individually has helped a lot. Just keep the peace in our house.
And it kind of like makes it fun, because then you get to be more yourself. Like for me, I know that I'm a very like effervescent is what I like to call it. Just like, and I try to like stay in that place. Like I know things happen, you know, that I'm not always this way all the time, but it's important for me to like get back here and like ground myself in this place, because that's how I would prefer to be, you know, waking up smiling and bubbly.
And I mean, everyone has their bad days. It's not to say that, you know, things just don't always go perfect.
Self-compassion, like that is the number one thing. So I'm a very ambitious woman, and so I do a lot of different things, and you know, this little voice in my head was always like beating myself up, like saying, you know, you're not doing this right, or you're not doing that right, or you're not doing this right. And it was like that negative self-talk was so loud. And that's why I meditate, because it doesn't really, that voice doesn't ever really go away, but I've learned to like tame it, and I've learned to recognize when it's happening and then start showering myself with love. Because I think about, you know, my daughter, and I wouldn't talk to her like that. I wouldn't raise her like that, and I wouldn't want her to feel like that about herself. And I found that when I give myself compassion for certain things, I'm more successful.
Yeah, it can be very limiting when you have that voice in your head.
I think the world needs a lot more compassion right now, and a lot more love. And so I practice it on myself, but sometimes if we don't know how to do it on ourselves, then you can start by being compassionate around other people. And the more you start to do that for other people, you'll, you know, like it's a domino effect, and you'll start to feel it more within yourself too.
To talk to yourself like you would talk to somebody that you love.
Yes. That's the whole thing, is loving yourself and loving on yourself, and just really getting in tune with your, what I call your heart power. My heart power that led me to doing all this. That's why I love this. Actually listening to it and putting everything together has been really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, you gotta live by what you're saying.
Exactly,
it's hard.
Exactly.
But we make it happen.
Yes.
And that's what's important.
Well, I love this whole conversation. And if you want to continue the conversation, you know, we're building a community on shespeaksfreely.com. So if you go to that website, you know, sign up. We're so excited to actually build that community. These conversations are brief in nature. We don't go into too much detail. But if you actually join the conversations in a private setting, we actually get a lot more in depth on certain topics. So next week's conversation is going to be all about managing your fear and anxiety. So.
Yeah, anxiety is something I think we both struggle with, and everybody struggles a little bit with.
Yes, so. I'm really excited for that episode as well.
Yeah, and we plan to post one of these little short videos every week. It ran a little bit late, but life happens, so we'll try to get on a more consistent schedule, but we're gonna make sure that we keep posting things like this. That way anybody who needs to hear them can hear them.
Yes, that's wonderful.
All right, well, we'll see you guys next week. Bye.